All right, so we're right between Pride seasons in Canada, and it looks like maybe we might have a chance to fly our own flag. Oh, I guess no, they found a new one entirely. Marty up north, welcome back. In fact, welcome back to me. I haven't been doing any posts on this channel. I've been moving. This is
Moving, yeah.
my big thing. So, of course, I wanted to keep the Wednesday shows going, even during this whole move. So I'm going to be in this echoey room discussing stuff with you today, Marty. Been looking forward to this though.
Yeah, I like what actually I like how you started this. You know, we've talked about this, right? There's different there's recurring themes every calendar month. Like it's crazy, right? And we know Pride Week is coming. Well, what is it now? It's not even Pride Month. I think it's Pride season now. Like
It's more
it
than
gets
just a month
yeah,
or a week. It used to be a day. It used to be that was it. That's unheard of today.
yeah, and I made a joke earlier this week that because there's a small story that came out about the residential schools in BC, and so I made a joke. I'm like, okay, well they're going to try and squeeze in a week of residential schools between the drought and Pride Month. You know what I mean? So try and squeeze one in, but then they all got overshadowed because now I don't have my bracelet. But this week, like did you have
I didn't know
period
anything.
bracelets
I've never heard of
your
this.
on your bingo card?
No, I
No,
didn't. It
yeah.
wasn't on my bingo card. Anyway, for people who don't know about this, the government of Canada is wearing period bracelets. Made made me prouder to be a Canadian, says petrified COVID parent. This is a thing. I guess it's strange that people are just figuring out that women have periods, and that's news for a lot of people. Apparently, it's a big hardship. Well, I mean, for a long time, it was a hardship until sanitary products came about and all that stuff. So, I mean, there's some truth to it, but I mean, it's not deserving of like all of this. It's all over Twitter right now. It's hilarious. All these government officials.
And we're talking about this mocking them, right, Clyde? I
Yeah,
mean, because they want us to talk about this in a serious tone because they want us because it's a distraction from other things. So we're not biting. I don't give a shit. Like this is a pure distraction, and I will mock anybody. Like, yeah, women having a period is a whatever. It's a serious thing, but the when we're talking about parliament, like and not just any parliamentarians. I mean, I'm gonna be blunt here. Like when we got Muslim parliamentarians standing in front of a microphone talking about like the importance of providing whatever feminine hygiene products to women. I'm like, come on, man, you're being a hypocrite. Like seriously, you're being a hypocrite. I mean, you might get in trouble for this, but I don't need Muslims lecturing me on the equal rights and especially not on women's rights. So let's go there. I'll go there.
you'll go
Yeah.
there. The TD
Yeah.
leaker on Twitter went to attention, fellow Canadians. It's time to celebrate Canadian Hemorrhoid Relief Day, and he has his own bracelet set up for that one.
That is gross.
I mean, if we're just gonna celebrate
Okay.
bodily functions or things like that, I mean, it does get ridiculous. I mean, it doesn't get more ridiculous than what we've got going on right now. I don't see the point of these celebrations, but yeah, here we
Yeah.
are. Here we are.
No, it's a distraction. I mean, I'll go back to what are they trying to distract us from, right? Because this week they brought out, or in the last couple of weeks, they brought out the abortion card. They brought out bodily control, women having control over their bodies, periods, things like that. We're still 515-ish days away from the election, so it's a little early. So these are not election issues at this point. They're just bringing out things as a distraction, I think.
I think that they
Distraction?
didn't bring out the distraction that you thought might be coming because of news that there is no news on that story. The residential
Right.
school story has become a complete nothing burger, and anyone who spoke out against it and got canceled, things like that. I mean, they're all vindicated. A lot of people are vindicated for
Totally.
just saying that no, there's no evidence. There is no evidence.
Well, I mean, we're going to talk about all these things. We're vindicated over the residential schools. We're definitely getting vindicated over the COVID excessive mandates, the harms done by vaccines. We're getting vindicated by the silliness of the immigration policy, and like nothing that the liberals have done is turning out right. And us on the conspiracy side, what are we batting now? We're batting like 18 for 20. I mean, where have we been wrong? We haven't been wrong anywhere. We haven't been wrong anywhere.
Well, and
Like
that's actually a
I
perfect segue into one of the stories that I wanted to talk about today, and that 15-minute cities has become a conspiracy theory in the mainstream media, where they're even trying to bring back the idea that the World Economic Forum existing is a conspiracy theory. They've got their website, they've got a YouTube channel,
yeah.
they get together with all our elected officials once or twice a year. It's unreal. But I got this news clip because this has been circulating around about how 15-minute cities there may not be going forward because of conspiracy theories that people have been talking about.
We are building a cohesive city with opportunities for local living.
Population is rapidly growing, and we have to be able to accommodate for that. Right now, the plans we have are kind of Frankenstein together over decades.
The 15 new district plans and corresponding bylaws will replace 54 existing planning documents dating back to the 1980s.
Our city is growing. And the more we can accommodate within existing infrastructure and existing neighborhoods, better it is for the taxpayers as well.
Administration says the goal is to accommodate 600,000 new residents in redeveloped areas, with 50% of all new home units added through infill. The plan also calls for half of all future travel to be done by transit, and for residents to access all their daily needs within 15 minutes. Not everyone supports the plan.
My understanding is that this means I will need to stay within my district to meet all my needs so that the city can meet its climate plan objectives.
I don't think Edmontonians can afford to be part of a renovation experiment of this size so quickly.
I think unfortunately a lot of the district plan in particular have been derailed by 15-minute cities, conspiracy theories, World Economic Forums, etc. At the end of the day, this is about land use.
It's about land use. So 15-minute cities are a conspiracy theory. What do you think, Marty?
We're calling out their bullshit, and people are resisting. Thankfully, like, we love freedom more than, we do love freedom, and we're not going to be pushed into these 15-minute cities. This is classic. So when something's not going their way, now they're turning it around and saying that we're conspiring against the government. Well, no, we're not conspiring against the government. We're trying to get the government to do what we want them to do, which is how government is supposed to work. Like we're hearing this over and over and over. Government officials, bureaucrats, and politicians mad at us for not bending to their will. That's not the way it works. So if we don't think, most people don't think 15-minute city is a good idea. It sounded good at first. But then once people started really understanding what it meant, they went, no, it's not. It's a bad idea. And so we're being accused of conspiring. No, we're exercising our rights.
Well, the funny thing that I always thought about people arguing against 15-minute cities, because I don't want to be controlled. I don't want to be held captive in a particular area and told I can't leave. Or you can leave, but you only so many times a year, or these kinds of things that are actual plans. I mean, they're actual plans. They're well documented. The World Economic Forum, the whole the diversity, equity, inclusion stuff that they've been preaching about, and the climate goals. Now, that being said, if you're fighting against it, the worst way to fight against something like this is to say that convenience is not a good thing. So you're not going to win any favor with people. You're like, no, we shouldn't have convenience. Like I lived in Tokyo, living in the city. I mean, everything's not exactly 15 minutes away, but there's always, like, having amenities nearby is great. It's fantastic, but that comes about naturally with economic growth. I think that, if you want those conveniences, the government's not going to bring them to you. If the government is trying to be in charge of bringing people conveniences, they're most often going to do a terrible job of it.
Well, and quite honestly, I mean, cities, I would say all cities started out every place where humans live started out as a 15-minute city. In fact, it probably started out as a 2-minute city, right? I mean, the first settlement would be like you can get from your place to my place in 2 minutes, and then cities grew. So every small town I've ever looked at is a 15-minute city. But once a city becomes like 3 million people, it's not going to be a 15-minute city. So what are they proposing? They're proposing an amalgamation of like little 15-minute cities all over the place. But that's definitely not how towns in North America evolve, right? I mean, we have towns where generally the modern towns like Calgary, I can take Calgary as an example. I mean, there's the residential areas, and then there's the downtown core where you work, and then there's the airport, the industrial court, and then the shopping district. So we went down a path. So now are they saying the path we went down doesn't work? What Canadians and people are telling the mayor of Edmonton, for instance, is no, we like it the way it's working for us, right? And so why do they want 15-minute city? What does the mayor want? What's his objective? By the way, that's Amarjeet Sohi. Okay, this is my theme lately. I like to mock these guys because they're full of bad ideas. Amarjeet Sohi is just a guy who is full of bad idea. He's the guy who under his watch, they bought electric buses from a company that just went bankrupt. And, there's $65 million worth of electric buses in Edmonton sitting there idle because they don't have the parts to repair them. They can't charge them. They can't do anything. So these guys like when he says, I have the solution. No, you don't, man. You have zero track record. Like you have no track record. You know what I mean? Like a guy who has Elon Musk has a track record. So if Elon says we're going to try something, you got a track record, right?
It doesn't mean he's automatic success in every endeavor that he's going to do. I mean, his evacuated tube transport, that was a complete failure. But that doesn't mean don't trust him. He's got a track record of good things that he's done. But like on the conspiracy theory side of this, there's actual plans in places like England, for example. I think it was Cambridge, the town of Cambridge, where they're talking about sectioning it off, where they'll have particular zones, and you if you live in that zone, you can't leave the zone, and you can't go to the other side of Cambridge and visit unless you have permits and you have permission to go, and you can only be given permission to go X amount of times a year. And if also, I think traveling using petrol, like using gasoline, you can only do that so many times, and then if you overuse, you get fines because of this. This is all incorporated in the 15-minute city thing.
Yeah, it's all in the 15-minute cities, and it's also and there's a lot of other things that are possible. I mean, is it exaggerated to think that you could end up in a system where I go visit you because you happen to be in another neighborhood, and then we say, okay, let's meet and let's go to this Starbucks, and then I go to pay with my debit card because we don't have cash anymore, and as soon as I swipe my debit card, they're going to go, oh well, you're from neighborhood A. What are you doing in this neighborhood? Your cash is no good here. You're in the wrong city. And these are ways to control us. I mean, they want to control us. That is one of their goals. Like that's not a conspiracy to me anymore. That is not a conspiracy. Our governments want to control us for all sorts of reasons. And this is an attempt at that, and Canadians are pushing back. There's been the good thing, actually, it's a really good thing. There's been a lot of pushback lately. I'm glad there's a lot of pushback because stories keep breaking out. You and I and others are keep breaking out stories, and now people are waking up. But at the same time, it's a good news. But I'm also shocked at how effective the brainwashing has been. Like it's
well, that's it. Like the government, if they, a lot of people will think that they don't want to do this because that's not their motive. If you think about it, they can implement this kind of thing because look at China. They have implemented this kind of thing. They want to implement this kind of thing. Just look at the years during COVID and their behavior. They're happy to implement this kind of thing. Massive controls over the population, telling people when they can travel, when they can leave their house, who they can associate with. All of this.
They got millions of Canadians to load the ArriveCan app on their phone and show that coming through the airport, and then if it flagged you and accidentally flagged you the wrong way, you're off to a quarantine hotel. and people did that. COVID vaccines, the QR codes. I mean, the QR codes have become synonymous. Like, and I'm shocked. I actually asked this. I went to I went for coffee with a friend about a month ago, and he paid. And he had an Apple Watch, and he swiped his watch, right? He just put his watch over the reader. Yeah. And I asked him, I said, Roland, I'm like, would you ever consider convenient? But the convenience is a can of worms.
Sorry,
right?
We just went silent there for a second.
Oh, did I? Sorry. Yeah, no, I was just saying my buddy accepted a huge convenience, which surprised me because that convenience can be used in so many nefarious ways, right? I mean, putting your payment system in your hand in a chip. And but yeah, the convenience for him outweighs a lot of the possible bad side effects, and I'm not there.
Yeah, well, I think during COVID they pushed too far. They got to a point, and then they pushed too far, and then people realized, no, my liberties are actually much more important than my safety or conveniences and things like that. And this woke up a lot of people, and people are going, nope, forget it. No, and you're not going to do it again, even though they do try, and they're making plans to do this kind of thing again. This was a great meme that somebody shared in my Discord community. If you're a Discord member, the link is in the description down below, and come join the community. This is a great one. American medical institutions start preparations for bird flu by working on their bird flu dance routines. And I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous, but this is the reality of the situation. We have
you're back.
Oh, did you lose me there for a second?
That's okay. Yeah, just for the viewers, I think they know that poor Clyde's moving right now, so he's working out of a temporary studio, so there's a few glitches today. But that's a few glitches,
good. But yeah, so this is the idea. They're moving back into this whole thing, and people are saying no by mocking it, but also exposing it. We have this here. This is Odessa Orwitz. She posted this clip of a longer video. This was a long Zoom session amongst officials in Canada. Notably, this is Teresa Tam and Bonnie Henry from British Columbia. She's been quite instrumental. She's being sued, by the way. I think several lawsuits against her for her role in the COVID-19 thing. But I digress. Let me just play the clip, because this is a clip of them conspiring for the next big power grab they can do.
I don't know who messages on that, but I also know that there's a gap. We always seem somehow left with holding the bag, as it were, on the pets. So I'm assuming farm cats are pets. So we do have to think about that as well in terms of messaging. Yes, there's a whole other.
Can I add one other thing? Sorry, Teresa.
Yes.
On a positive note, we shut down mink farms in BC, as you may know. Ontario, be aware, you still have them, and they launched a lawsuit against us that was just thrown out yesterday. So,
Clyde, I watched the whole hour version of this video. It was so cringe on so many ways. I mean, on the one hand, I'm like, on the one hand, it was scary listening to Tam trying to orchestrate this. She basically sounded like she's trying to orchestrate this next wave of propaganda. Mm-hmm. That's scary enough. But then the other thing that was cringe is that the actors that she's surrounded with are morons. Like, half the people in that room are morons. And when they're talking, they sound like idiots. They're distracted. They're doing and I lose faith in their ability to do a proper professional job. But then I also get reassurance going, you know what? I'd rather they be morons for the next round, because they might not be successful in getting us to bend to their wishes. But
Bonnie Henry there just laughing, giddy at the fact that she shut down mink farmers, people who are trying to earn a living doing things in the marketplace. And she, like, it's nothing against It's just crazy. Like I think these people just love shutting things down. This is the rush that they get from that.
They love the power. And think about, there are lots of people who love the power of that thing. There are lots of people who love the ability to get on the phone and report on their neighbors, or write a bad review for a restaurant who let in somebody without a mask. Like, it's this power is an aphrodisiac, and it wasn't just the politicians who enjoyed the power during COVID. There was lots of citizens who enjoyed that sense of power. But yeah, they're getting us ready for what? N5H1, H1N5, whatever. Some bird flu is the next
another
one.
bird flu, yeah.
But it's true. But they're preparing for it, Clyde. I know it because I've been looking at other statistics. Like this week, somebody, like you, I get this. My inbox I have people who send me little things and little hints to go look at. So I went and looked at the Alberta government website, and COVID testing is on the rise again. And there's no rhyme or reason why they're increasing the testing, except that, COVID is an asymptomatic disease, and it's one of those diseases that unless you test, you don't even know you have it. So what's the best way to create a pandemic of COVID? Is to increase the testing, because if you test enough people, you will eventually find cases. And I have to think that nefariously at this point. There's no other reason why the government is increasing the testing. They're getting ready for another wave.
It's like testing people for this. What is this? Staphylococcus bacteria? I mean,
yeah,
because people might get staph infections. For those that don't know, everyone has that bacteria on their skin. It's just normal everyday life. If you test somebody, they'll come up positive, but it doesn't mean that they have a staph infection. It really is crazy. And they botched the whole thing last time. And I mean, they admit to it. I mean, what's this new video that's circling around of Teresa Tam, where she's talking about?
She's talking about so the vaccine. Let's remind people, right? The COVID vaccines were approved in quotations under emergency use. That's it, because we were in an emergency. The government declared an emergency, and then there was no other effective remedies. They shut down all the trials. So any school that was studying the efficacy of ivermectin or HQC or whatever, they shut down all those trials.
And the media demonized those medicines as well. It's really unbelievable how, like, in lockstep they did that.
Yeah. I mean, it was horse paste, right? Ivermectin is a drug that's been created. It's generic. It costs pennies. It's saved millions of people from agony on the African continent because it kills this parasitic worm. Blah blah blah.
But if it was used as a therapeutic, then they wouldn't have emergency authority to.
Bingo. So the video that came out is a video that must have been recorded slightly after they approved the vaccine, where they said, well, we don't know the side effects, but we're going to inject 1 million people, so we're confident in our systems, and if there are side effects, then we'll hopefully pick up the side effects quickly. Basically, she's admitting that we're going to use a huge population of millions of Canadians as guinea pigs, and we tested it on 80 rats, so it should be good. In
her own words here.
Every medication or vaccine can come with rare side effects, which will not be picked up until many millions of people might receive the vaccine. The initial clinical trial with tens of thousands will not pick up rare events. So I think the important thing, to emphasize to everyone is that we have systems and checks and balances in place. But please do remember that over the course of the administration of the vaccine to many millions of people in the world, if there should be any new signals, we will be communicating that after a thorough examination. But science will continue to evolve in this space.
She's cold, man. She's cold, like very cold. I mean, she sends me. I get chills listening to her because she's talking about millions of people's lives as if it's no big deal. We're just gonna, do this. And it's chilling. To me, it's chilling.
For me, I'm looking at the current political situation with the Liberals, and then they're bringing up this abortion debate as if it was like an actual debate right now. And they're the ones saying that Canadians should have a right to choose their own medical decisions. And that's where it gets egregious, and it's this gaslighting that I just cannot stand. It's disgusting what they pulled during the pandemic, and then for them to come out and say it as if that they never did what they did.
Yeah. Like we're the party that's pro bodily choice. No, you're not. No, you're not. You're absolutely not. Like, you violated our rights, left, right. You violated the rights of women. Yeah. And the other thing I don't like about that video and the pandemic and other things is the hypocrisy, right? Like, how often have you ever heard somebody say, oh, well, if it saves just one life, right? Like, we should all wear our masks. What if it saves just one life? Because I used to say that all the time. Like, the virus has a survivability of 99.6%. And people would go, well, what if it's your child that dies? I'm like, well, then my child was the really unlucky and was the odd one out. But on the flip side, they always say, what if it saves one life? What if it kills one life?
Yeah.
So, like, if a life is that valuable, I like using that argument too. That's one of my go-to arguments for owning guns. What if owning a gun saves one life? Oh, well, that's not what we mean. I'm like, well, you just said a life is valuable, and if I own a gun someday and somehow or other I manage to save a life with my gun, yeah. So they pick and choose.
Well,
right?
it's not logic unless it's universal, and that's we all know that from thousands of years ago, Socrates. I mean, we should all know these things. But yeah, Canada's in a real state at the moment, and I mean, it's just I can't believe it. But I think that there are a lot of people looking forward to an event that's bound to happen eventually. Don't think we're going to see an early one. So everybody's looking at the calendar and the countdown. And this is the official countdown. I'll leave a link in the description for people to check this out. But it's actually a tickcounter.com counter for
I asked somebody to build that. That was somebody who built that for me. I got to go back and find the credit properly, but I asked somebody to do that for me because I was constantly doing it in my head, and so they built that little counter. And then if anybody notices Marty's header profile picture on Twitter, I have the counter there. I keep changing it. Remember how silly? Like, no. I was gonna go down there. Remember the low carbon content switch on the COP26. No, I'm distracted now.
Well, here's something to look at. Here's Andrew Scheer talking about if the economy had stayed where it was heading in 2015, Canadians would all be earning an extra $4,200 per year, according to illuminating new report from StatsCan. This is the government reporting that this is where it would be if some event that happened in 2015, I don't know, maybe there was something that happened in 2015 that changed the course of Canada forever, or at least for a while. And we would all be a lot better off if that event didn't occur. So yeah, that's a little bit of food for thought there.
I'm glad they're pointing this out. I mean, it's being pointed out in other measures, right? Our GDP per capita is pre 2014. So in that GDP per capita, I'm not a fan of GDP because it can be manipulated, but since the government likes to use it, then I'm going to use it against them. Their GDP, the way they calculate it per capita, is lower than today than it was in 2014. So they've set us back. And GDP per capita, I think, is a good proxy for sort of an overall standard of living. And the Liberals have taken...
Here's an interesting question. Is there a place where you can find a calculation of the GDP if the government spending was not added to it as income?
Yeah, there is. I mean, there's... I think it's a website similar to it's on Stats Canada somewhere. I can go look for it tomorrow. It's similar to, they have something called the Consumer Price Index portal, and I think there's something like the GDP Economic Portal, and you can go there and you can see the pieces that make up the GDP, and you can sort of click off on some of them quickly and have it recalculated. So, I mean, that's one of the beauties of our country is and our bloated government. I love our bloated government for one thing. The thousands of bureaucrats who just enter data all day long without questioning, And then, so I know they try and suppress the data, because they suppress a lot of data, but there's so much of it, and there's so many clerks entering data, they can't suppress it all.
So for people who don't
CPI
understand this concept, the GDP, when they calculate the GDP, is gross domestic product of Canada. So that's the product that Canada makes for itself in the world. They include government spending in this calculation. They include government expenditures, programs, things like that as a gross domestic product. It's the equivalent of having a household budget and then, you know, hiring people to do yard work and include that as income. It really is ridiculous, and it shouldn't be calculated this way. You wouldn't be able to do it on your own, in your household.
It's actually probably even more ridiculous than that, Clyde, but there's no equivalency in a household, because a household is sort of a pretty normal thing. A government is not a normal thing. Our government, especially our government, you're right. Like, our government hires 10,000 people to spend borrowed money, and somehow or other, they think that makes the gross domestic product go up. I mean, the gross domestic product, if we had a good way to describe it is if you had a ring around Canada and you could count every dollar that's leaving Canada that we're producing. And there's no way, they love to, well, they're also one of the ones that I find annoying in the GDP. They love to bring that out. First of all, they love to bring it out because basically it's kind of like the net worth of the country. So when we're borrowing a bunch of money, they like to compare how much money we're borrowed to how much money we actually are worth. And so they have this fake ratio. They like, as long as we, you know, borrow less than 50% of what we're worth, we're okay. Well, what they do is they keep borrowing out of control. So to justify this out of control borrowing, they artificially inflate the GDP. And one of the ways they've inflated GDP in the last decade is by including these immigrants. They're not even working, but they're giving every new immigrant a value. And then if you actually, you're bringing up a good point. I did look at this because I was curious as to how the GDP was calculated. And then they even put things like a productivity per worker, and the productivity per worker is higher than it's ever been. They even they forecast that our productivity is going to go up miraculously in the future, when in fact it's gone down for decades after decades. So it's a very manipulated number. I don't like it, but I'll use it against them when when I'm playing their game.
Well, it's just like the jobs numbers that they keep bringing out. Those are manipulated numbers as well. They're saying there's record new jobs in the market. For one, if we have 1 million more people than we had last year, I hope there would be more than 1 million new jobs, right? But the reality of the situation is a lot of these jobs, people have more than one. People have multiple jobs. People have a part-time job here, a part-time job there, and maybe a gig job in the evenings. So you have one person has 3 jobs that only 9 years ago would have only had one job. That's a lot more jobs in the market.
You have to look at again, a good point. Like to understand how healthy, let's say, the employment market is, I would suggest that you would have to look at about 4 or 5 pieces of data simultaneously and try and get an idea. Like you'd have to look at the participation in the workforce, the number of jobs versus part-time, the earnings, the number of hours they work, and all those things. And then in aggregate, then you could reflect on whether it's getting better or worse. But just one of those, like unemployment is the worst one, right? To just say, "Ooh, unemployment is low, therefore things are good." No, we know that unemployment is calculated by unemployment is people currently on unemployment insurance. Mm-hmm. So if your unemployment insurance runs out and you still haven't found a job and you kind of give up, you're not even counted as an unemployed worker. You're under the radar. So just quick story. I read Alan Greenspan. Does the name Alan Greenspan ring a bell to you? He used to be the chairman of the
in the 80s when it went skyrocketed, when everybody had those huge interest rates to pay on their mortgages.
Yeah, I read his book, and Alan Greenspan used to look at something like 60 or 70 graphs every day. Like his first thing in the morning, somebody would give him a folder back in the days, right? Today you probably do this electronically, but he would look at 70 graphs, like export, imports, the exchange rate, blah blah blah, and then sort of flip through his 60 graphs and then say, yeah, today the economy is positive, tomorrow it's negative, today it's like he'd rate the economy every single day based on the 60 graphs, and it was fascinating to read that, you know.
Well, he was smart enough to know that they were in a dire circumstance, and he raised the interest rates way higher than any politician ever wanted to have happen on their watch, and way higher than any mortgage holder wanted. But it was the right thing to do, and a lot of people went through some pain, but it brought the economy back. That really was it. It encouraged savings. It fostered an environment where people wouldn't malinvest. They would invest in things that are only, you know, capital growth type of investments at the time. And, you know, people knew that if they're doing the right kind of investments, that would, you know, the interest rates would eventually come down. But you have, in a situation where interest rates are crazy high, you're going to have a lot more people hunkering down and trying to benefit from the saving, or the money you can make from having liquidity and putting that and lending it out, and you can make money from that.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, right now, I don't think right now it's frustrating. We can't make money doing anything in this country because everything is so like. People have said that. Oh, well, now's the perfect time to buy bonds. I wouldn't buy bonds right now.
No,
I mean, like you know, God, so many things we could talk about, and I like, yeah. Where's Trudeau? Where's Trudeau? Right? Where's Trudeau in all this? I think he's hiding today. He's definitely. We haven't seen him for a week, which is. I'm curious. I think there's bad news coming this week. I think there's bad news. I think there's going to be bad news on Friday. I just have it in my gut. Why else are they bringing out this whatever? They're not called contraceptives. What's the word? Yeah, contraceptives. Is that what they're talking about today? Is it contraceptives, or was it tampons, or was it maxi pads, or is it
all of the above? It's
all of the above.
Yeah, it's this idea that the government should provide these products and services for free. And they keep calling it free. And every time I hear a politician say, we're making something free, I always reply to them.
Brackets around it.
I reply to them, nothing's free. You're paying for these things with tax dollars. And generally, the way it works is you're going to have a bureaucracy around the distribution of this stuff. So if tampons or contraceptives are $10, $20, $30 at the grocery store or at the pharmacy, expect it to cost $100 when the government buys it. Like nothing is free.
Well, and there's a trend on, you know, on TikTok and on Instagram and on Twitter where people are like taking pictures of the grocery basket and complaining about it, or taking a picture at the gas pump and complaining about it. People are complaining about gas. People are complaining about beef, cereals, apples. I haven't heard anybody complaining about contraceptives. No. And so it's a distraction. And
it's bait. It's bait. What it is you know, the conservatives will come in, they'll say vote no against that, and then the liberals can say they don't care about women, they don't care about, you know, reproductive choices and all of this stuff. It's a game. It's a game to them, and they're playing it with our money, and that's what really bothers me the most.
Yeah, actually, there was a vote today in the House of Commons where the Conservatives and the Liberals agreed on something. What the hell was it? Once in a while, you get one like that. But yeah, I agree. Most of the votes are just so you can go back on their voting record, which they love to do. I mean, God, yeah, like you know, who was it last week? Somebody was talking about Pierre Poilievre's voting record from 2006. Who cares? Like, who cares what? You know,
some people do, but it's crazy. And you know, I've been trying to pay attention to as much as I can during this move, but I'm stacked. I've had a hard time paying attention to what's going on. But one thing locally that I discovered is my town, our little district, has decided to, on the May long weekend, instill a fire ban. And they haven't lifted it.
Right. May Long Weekend was passed.
Yes, and they haven't lifted it. So the place where I'm moving, the neighbor there, he went to have a fire out in the yard, fire pit, no trees or whatever around, and the cops showed up at his house. You have to put it out. The district said anything within the district boundaries can't have a fire, and that's that. And it's a move to make it look like, oh, we're doing something to save the climate. This is what my friend said, by the way. He said, I think this is a move to say, like, some counselor is like, look at me, I'm saving the planet. Here's the problem. Here's the problem with this. This pushes anybody further out. So instead of being at home where you've got a hose and you've got all this stuff where you can put your fire out and make sure it's safe, anybody who wants to have a fire, they have to drive outside of the district, which isn't that far.
That is.
But now you have more chances of the thing spreading. Nowhere in British Columbia is there the rules like this.
Oh God, we've okay. Well, I guess Alberta's been there for a decade, so we've been doing stupid things like that in Alberta for a decade. I mean, these are unintended consequences that backfire. Along those lines, Alberta went through a long period in the 1980s and 90s. We built little parks everywhere, nice national little provincial parks everywhere. Mm-hmm. And but back in those days, there weren't ATVs, right? And to this day, all those national parks, little provincial parks, have a rule that says no ATVs. And people have complained all along that, hey, we just want to camp there. The government paid for these beautiful little parks. There's tent pads. We just want to park there. We'll have our ATV. We're just going to ride our ATV directly in a line out of the campsite and then head off onto Crown land. And the government has said no all along. Well, people want to ride ATVs and you can't stop them. So what's happening? People are camped 1 mile. You go 1 mile in a radius around these little provincial parks, and there's people all over the bush in their big trucks with their ATVs. The campsites are empty, and then people are making fire rings and fires and doing everything. And then, it's a consequence of, and the solution is simple. Let people in the park use their ATV, direct line in and out. COVID was the same thing, Clyde. I mean, it was the exact same thing. They shut down they shut down the national parks during COVID. Remember that? And we have Crown land right next to the national park. So, all right, we can't go to the national parks. Guess what happened? The Crown land got invaded by people with their campers. So what did the government do next? They implemented a fee. And then what do people do when they have to pay a fee? They expect services. And what does the government become responsible for when they charge you a fee? They're liable. So now the national parks are empty. People are on Crown land, paying a fee to camp on Crown land. The government had to staff up, go and inspect the campsites, provide garbage cans, make them safer, increase the fees so that more people, welcome to government, Canadian government 101.
It's unbelievable. Yeah. And
I mean, you guys still have the story. I mean, you know, the big news story, it's in BC, but it's the federal government. You guys, the federal government spent $12 million to kill 80 deer on some island in BC. Yep. I can't remember what's the island.
I can't remember the name of the island, but they went out there and they had the audacity to hire a crew to shoot AR-15s with 30 round magazines from helicopters. Yeah, all the things that we're not allowed to do.
The crews, I think the crews were from New Zealand, right? Mm-hmm. And so and they were indiscriminate. They shot the deer, and they didn't even go recover the deer. You could have hired. You think of the cultural enrichment we could have done by allowing some local First Nation the opportunity to go on hunt on their ancestral lands and shoot these deers the old-fashioned way. But no, that would make too much sense. Yeah. How does the government spend $12 million shooting 80 deer? Welcome to Canada.
Just look at the Arrive can. That's a story where, you know, they're just embezzling, scooping off the top. Like, it's not even scooping off the top. It's making it bigger so that they can heist the whole thing. It's unbelievable.
Yep. Well, I mean, this week we started talking about it. We never finished it, but the story broke out today. They didn't find any buried bodies at the residential school in Kamloops or whatever, but they spent $8 million. Somehow or other, they spent $8 million, and they didn't even dig up a grave. $8 million, 7.8, but they spent $7.8 million, and they didn't dig up a grave. Now they're blaming it on incinerators. Maybe now they're saying, well, I'm like, well, you're confusing me. So you said that there was the whole idea was that there was unmarked graves, but then
because
you
of
didn't
the
find
ground
graves.
penetrating radar. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That
So
turned
then
out
you
to
said,
be
well, maybe
wrong.
they didn't bury the kids. Maybe they just. So are you trying to find missing children? What are you trying to do? I don't get it. I made a joke. It's not a joke. I proposed something very serious today, actually, or yesterday. This week, we repatriated a Newfoundland soldier to Canada, an unknown soldier, right? So the tradition of the unknown soldier is that, during wars, soldiers get killed and lose their dog tags, and then they get buried in a cemetery. So there's a soldier who's buried, and we don't know who he is. He's a Canadian soldier, but we don't know his name. We know soldiers who got killed, but we might not be able to identify where they're buried. Anyways, so it's a tradition. We have an unknown soldier, the grave of the unknown soldier in Ottawa, where we bring an unknown soldier and bury him there to represent all unknown soldiers. I thought maybe it's time we have a grave for the unknown or unmarked or unidentified missing children from residential schools. But to me, it's the similar story. I mean, there's no outrage over the missing soldiers, and trust me, there's 50,000 missing soldiers in Canadian history that were, blown up on a foreign battlefield somewhere and never got buried, and we don't, where am I going with this?
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
What it is it's a story of, there was a suspicion that children were killed in these residential schools. There's no, I don't know of any list of children that have gone missing from the residential schools. There's documentation of children catching and dying of tuberculosis,
polio, whooping cough, tuberculosis, all sorts of things like that. And I think the Truth and Reconciliation report, which apparently nobody's ever read, all 8,000 pages of it, it does list, it almost lists like the 65,000 children who went to residential school and 61,500 who went back home, and then 1,500. So in 80 years of residential school history, 1,800 children died in the schools of like you said. I mean, living in the 1930s was not easy. Not easy.
Nope.
Not
especially
easy.
in remote areas like that.
Absolutely.
It would have been a lot worse.
And if people think of those days and the practices of those days, they associate them with modern practices. They go, well, why wouldn't they just fly the body back home? It's like, if you're at a residential school in Kamloops, it's quite possible that you came from a band, a day's travel up north, and they were dirt poor. So we didn't pick up the phone and call mom and dad on the band and say, your child just died. What do you want us to do with the body? The priests would have done something. They would have been, and that's the other thing. These schools were mostly run by Christian types, right? Whether they're Catholic priests or nuns or Protestants, whatever. But they're people who took pride in some things. And I don't think they were randomly just ditching bodies into the dump after somebody died. I'm pretty sure they treated them with respect, buried them, and over time the crosses disappeared. I mean, that's yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, though, that what turned up in the ground penetrating radar didn't produce a single body, and they've refused to actually dig into the site. No remnants have been found. And it's looking like it's going to become a giant embarrassment for media and the government at the end of the day.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, the report was called Truth and Reconciliation. So we want to know the truth. Yes. Well, some of the truth is, I will accept that there was mistreatment of kids. Guaranteed there was. And I will accept that there was some hardships, and I will accept that not everybody went willingly. And so there's an ugly side to it. So as part of the truth, I will recognize that. But as part of the truth, I hope that they'll recognize at some point that, yeah, the idea that they were just dumping bodies in mass graves is ridiculous. And let's move on. If we want the truth, then take the $7.8 million and go dig up a whole strip. And if there's nothing in that spot where you thought there was going to be bodies, well, then let's just say, yeah, we made a mistake. There's, and move on.
Well, Marty, then that would be the last $8 million that you get. And that's the reality of it. When people find a thing to fundraise on, they don't want it to drive. They don't want it to go away. They don't want it to be completed.
And I think they're full of shit in another sense. I mean, I use ground penetrating radar. Okay. I worked at a facility up north, and we were expanding the facility, and we needed to build in the corner. And before we started doing too much work, one of the old timers at the plant came by and said, we used to dump garbage there. There used to be an old garbage pit back there. I was like, oh, okay, we need to find where the garbage pit is. We got that ground penetrating radar, and we just swept the whole area quickly back and forth. Dude, I could see everything in there. Like, maybe bones are harder to see, but when we were using ground penetrating radar, I could see bottles, I could see wrenches, I could see crushed barrels, I could see cans, I could see everything. And yeah.
Not just anomalies.
It is what it is.
For people who want to know more information on this, I did a podcast with Jim McMurtry, and he's well versed on this now. He's a teacher in British Columbia who was fired for he didn't call it a hoax or any of that stuff. He was just fired for saying, wait a second, the evidence doesn't seem to suggest that there was a massacre of any type. And these teachers,
and his firing was rapid, right?
It was very rapid. It was that day.
He came at the school one morning, and somebody said, "Oh, today we're celebrating this," and Jim said, "Well, that doesn't make sense." And just for questioning it, he got fired.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. And he, again, like I said, he didn't call it a hoax or anything like that. He just questioned, like, wait a second, like, the teachers there don't just assume that they're mass murderers. Let's actually look into this with some sensitivity, and he got canned for that, and he's still going through this, and I'm gonna have him back on the show when his tribunal or whatever they're calling.
Who else you should have on the show? Maybe you had her in relation to this, but Michelle Sterling. Have you ever had Michelle Sterling, Friends of Science, Michelle Sterling, on any of your shows?
No.
So reach out to Michelle Sterling if you can, and I can try and put you in touch. But she was on I listened to her on a show where she was talking with Jim. They were both talking on that subject. I didn't expect Michelle to talk about it, but Michelle talked about it from a personal perspective. I've always known Michelle as the Friends of Science busting the climate change narrative, but she came in on the show to talk about her personal experience with residential schools. And I was like, holy shit, I just wanted to listen to her for hours. I mean, the stuff that she brought up was, it's like she had been through it, had been in, I think she was in the schools or somebody in her family was in the schools, but she brought up some fantastic points. So reach out to Michelle if you get a chance.
Oh, I'd love to have her on to talk about the climate stuff too, if she's knowledgeable on that. Because
she's knowledgeable.
Well, yeah, because full circle, why do we have a fire ban in this wet little town that's raining every other day? It's because of hysteria. It's because of this hysteria.
You started down that path. And we went around that. I was on another call the other day. Wogpog?
Yeah. I've been in his what do you call them? Spaces on Twitter.
He was mad. He went on a rant on that whole subject because he wanted to cook a marshmallow in his backyard on his campfire, and he couldn't do it. And he was just furious because. Yeah. And then I looked into it, and you're right. You guys still have. You have unreasonable fire bans, I think, because based on I think it's a knee-jerk reaction. I think some governments right now are they're being overly cautious, and they're having big fire bans. And I think your government perhaps doesn't want to appear as doing nothing. So they're putting WOG seem to think that it's more nefarious. People just, the government wants to keep us out of the backcountry.
No, it's pushing us into the backcountry. This is the thing.
Yeah.
My argument is that it actually pushes us further into the backcountry, which brings a lot more danger of actual forest fires happening. It wouldn't be happening if you could just have it in your backyard. That's the whole thing. It's way safer when you got a hose right there. You've got all the things that you need. You got your telephone, you're in cell service, you got all this stuff. That's where you want to be having fires.
I'm going on a canoe trip in northern BC here. I leave next Friday. So next week we'll do the show, but I leave on Friday. I'm going up to Prince George. I'm going canoeing for 7 days, and I'm hoping there's no fire bans, because the beauty of going on, me, I love to hike, and normally I carry my food on my back and I limit myself to about a pound a day of food, so I starve. But on a canoe trip, you can, like, a good canoe can hold 800 pounds. So we eat like kings, but I need a fire, on my steak. I'm not cooking I'll tell you what, I'm making a fire no matter what. They can come look for me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
speaking of which, people can go check you out on your YouTube channel and check out your hikes that you've done. Where can people find you, Marty?
Just Marty Up North on YouTube and Marty Up North on Twitter. Careful on Twitter, because I have two Marty Up North. I have my original account that was blasted for pushing against the COVID narrative too much. It disappeared. It came back about 6 months ago. Elon Musk reinstated that. So I get a lot of people that go make comments on that one, but I don't check it very often. But Marty Up North on Twitter for sure.
Well, all the links in the description down below. We'll have you back next week. Hopefully I'll be in a better situation than I am currently. And we'll do this all again.
Cheers, man. Until next week.